Hello. Today I'm going to talk about a global pick. The artist is Claudio Gizzi. The album is an OST, Flesh for Frankenstein, Blood for Dracula from 1973 and 74. The label is RCA Verise Saraban. I'm going to talk about soundtrack again today. A lot of the Italian soundtracks I really love, and this one in particular I think is great. I used to have the 1993 CD version of this. Now I just listen to it on Spotify. Flesh for Frankenstein and Blood for Dracula are horror films written and directed by Paul Morrissey in 1973 and 74. They both star Udo Kier and Joe D'Alessandro. Sometimes they're called Andy Warhol's Dracula or Andy Warhol's Frankenstein, but he had little to do with them. Mainly it's the Paul Morrissey Andy Warhol Factory connection and Joe D'Alessandro. I saw Frankenstein in Space Vision 3D when I was about 20 or 21, I'd say. And that was quite an experience and eye-opener. It's a little bit like seeing Pink Flamingos for the first time. Both of these films originally were rated X. Lots of gore and almost porno-level nudity. I suppose you could call these like Eurotrash camp, but they are an experience for sure. And the soundtracks are stellar in my opinion. Essential listening. There are many tracks, they range from about a minute to 3 minutes. I think both soundtracks work well as one entity. They don't really have separate voices per se. I mean, the films are quite similar to begin with, so I can kind of see why. But if I had to break this down, I would say it's Gothic chamber music. There's a kind of Baroque European decadence to the whole thing. It gets pretty weird at some points. Two words I would use to describe it are ancient and broken. I think the themes to both films are quite good. I love the Frankenstein theme. It has so many variations and it just really works. When the strings come in, it's more emotional than the film perhaps deserves. There are some nice player piano moments which kind of contribute to the setting of the films, I think, like the era that they're supposed to take place in. There's nice use of these instrument spotlights, like a song that's only violin or only flute or piano. I love how there's this grandeur to the music, which juxtaposes with the graphic sex and violence in the films. It's quite an odd mix. It's strange because I think the soundtracks work well without watching the film. However, I also think they add a classiness to something that is the opposite of that, the prose. I definitely think the music elevates the camp. You know, these films were released on Criterion. I'm sure at the time they were more like exploitation films, but Gizzi takes this quite seriously, and I think some lesser composers would have been seduced by the camp and it would have influenced the score, I think. It's kind of like when you have a serious actor in a comedy and they play it straight. It's kind of hard to do. But these have this sparse dread, long pauses, this restrained orchestration. There's a quiet tension below the whole thing. It's not really like bombast that horror typically has, you know, like the Bernard Herrmann kind of stuff. It's just a lot more subtle than that. I would also say there is this kind of erotic morbidity to it, like beauty slowly rotting or being corrupted, which is a theme in both the movies. You have these sentimental melodies, but they are undercut by this unease through the whole thing. I think this is quite art house. Like I said, it elevates the camp. I think it aligns more with dreamlike Italian Gothic cinema than Hollywood horror. I really love the woodwinds and the piano. I actually find a lot of this relaxing, which is weird because at other times it's quite, there's a lot of dread. But Gizzi had this to say for Fangoria. Before writing Frankenstein's soundtrack, Paul had listened to Frankenstein's theme played on the piano and was very impressed. With reference to the 3D, I can remember having been able to see only as far as the end of my work, so I could not have been influenced at the time at all by the gimmick. And that's one thing I'll say about this. It definitely feels like he was free to do whatever he wanted to. The other thing is I can't really imagine these films with another soundtrack. This one just fits so well. The cons. It's a bit of a misnomer calling this film's horror. They are more like dark comedies. In fact, I think they're quite funny. Despite how ludicrous these are, I do see them as high art. You know, maybe the soundtracks would sound a little bit too old world for some, and I definitely think the films are too graphic for others. They are very intensely graphic, especially Frankenstein. I find them very endearing in this odd way. I love that they challenge all the conventions, but some people may not. And if you see the posters for the films, you would not expect this kind of music. But I do think there's a lot to love here. Final thoughts. I think this sounds like decaying aristocracy or something. It's mournful, elegant, erotic, and faintly sickly or something, kind of sweet. They actually remind me a bit of when I traveled to New Orleans. I found this kind of decay to everything, and there was this like rotting elegance, and that's kind of how these feel to me. Old and refined, but fading away like a memory or some kind of nostalgia. I do think that Udo Kier gives the performances of his life in these films. If you like Nicolas Cage and his kind of wackiness, you're gonna love what he does in these films. So I recommend them just for that reason. But if you have anything to say about them, you can post it below. Link is below, but that's all I got. Have a good day. Take care.